Before I start, let me make one thing clear. I'm not a junkie. I'm not an alcoholic. I've never had any diagnosed mental issues, no nervous breakdowns, no history of hallucinations. I only knew about that stuff from textbooks and memes. Yeah, I know. Every crazy person says exactly that. But believe me, after everything that happened, I actually went to see shrinks myself because I started doubting my own sanity. They ran their tests, did their evaluations. Turned out I'm perfectly sane. Unfortunately. Honestly, guys, at this point, being handed a piece of paper that says schizophrenia and a one-way ticket to a psych ward would be a relief. It would mean I'm the broken one, that I just drifted off from whatever passes for normal on this planet. That's fixable, understandable. But instead it feels like the world around me is what's broken, and nobody ever wrote a user manual for reality. Scientists still can't explain a whole list of phenomena and paradoxes. That alone gives me a bad idea. Maybe the thing that turned into the worst nightmare of my life is actually normal for the universe. Maybe it's just part of how things work. Maybe it happens all the time, on every corner, maybe every second. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's go in order. A few years back, I was a useless college kid who remembered he was a student only when finals were breathing down his neck. The rest of the time, I split between barbecues, chasing girls, and World of Tanks. It was World of Tanks that started all of this. On one of the forums, I met a guy. Let's call him Nate. We started as random teammates, then added each other on social media, and soon we were having long, late-night chats about everything. Over time, those chats got weirdly cozy and personal, like an old lamp in a dark room. Even though Nate is technically the reason I'm in this mess, I still can't think of him without respect. He was one of those freakishly smart, well-read people you almost never meet in gaming communities. No offense to tankers, but you know what I mean. When we met, he'd already had a rough life. His last living relative, his grandfather on his dad's side, had died just a year or so before. I never found out what happened to the rest of his family. He never talked about them, and I didn't have the guts to pry. Instead of dropping out and drinking himself into a coma, Nate threw everything he had into his future. He'd get up before dawn, head out to odd jobs around town, then take the bus into the city for evening classes. By the time of the events I'm describing, he'd finished art school and was teaching drawing in a local middle school, painting portraits on commission, selling landscapes online, even painting murals in small churches. Sometimes I envied that romantic life. Paint, small town, old house, quiet streets. In reality, though, the last thing I wanted was to trade the noise and lights of the city for a cramped apartment that reeked of paint thinner in some nowhere town in the middle of nowhere. Nate had only ever had one roof over his head. It was a beat-up old 3-story apartment block from the 60s on the edge of a small town called Greywater. Never heard of it? Before Nate, I hadn't either. Greywater was one of those nowhere towns about an hour and a half by commuter train from the city where I lived. It had two things going for it. First, a big wild forest with boggy patches, tangled undergrowth, pines, all that storybook wilderness. Second, a huge reservoir, as pretty as any natural lake. That reservoir was half the reason I agreed to visit. The other half was that we both got dumped around the same time. I split up with my girlfriend first, Nate a bit later. Either way, we both ended up single. I sank into whining and mild depression, while Nate, being who he was, switched straight to when life gives you lemons, get tequila and salt mode. No girlfriend? Hello, bachelor freedom. To cheer us both up, he invited me to spend a long weekend at his place. Go fishing, drink cheap beer, reset our brains. I hadn't held a fishing rod in 5 years, but I was ready to give a lot just to sit by the water again. Turned out I gave more than I ever imagined. Still, like I said, one thing at a time. From Monday on, I could barely sit still at lectures. All I could think about were those upcoming guys' weekend days. Cheap booze, fish flopping in a plastic bucket, cicadas buzzing under the noon sun, maybe a campfire. Friday morning, I grabbed my packed backpack and headed to the station. I had 3 days off, 2 of which I planned to spend in good company. I was in a ridiculously good mood. I'd love to give you some poetic description of Greywater, but honestly, screw that. And for 2 reasons. First, who cares? Second, most of it just didn't stick. The only thing I really remember is how clearly everything split into 2 halves. One half was boring. Fresh country estates for rich people, shiny new cabins, and modern houses with SUVs in the driveway. The other half looked like the 90s had just decided to stay. Peeling 5-unit blocks, rows of rusted garage boxes, cracked storefronts, mold-stained kiosks selling flat soda, and sad little liquor stores with stupid names and flickering signs. The locals were the cherry on top, people whose whole vibe said they'd stopped caring about time a long time ago. Nate met me at the station. Soon we were stocking up on the essentials for a serious fishing trip. Beer, bread, ham, more beer, dried fish in case we didn't catch anything, cigarettes, chips, beer. In real life, he turned out to be just as interesting as in chat, and the hours flew by. There's not much worth retelling. Our fishing turned into a mix of walking around, drinking, swatting mosquitoes, and trying to swim. We caught 2 pathetic little fish and didn't really care. Most of that day I barely remember. But I remember perfectly the moment where everything quietly tipped over. By evening, we were heading back to Nate's place. On the way, we passed the rusted skeleton of some old compact car half buried in weeds near the edge of the woods. 2 boys were messing around next to it. Curious and mellow from the beer, we asked what they were doing. "Catching lizards," one of them said. Our half-dead fishing instincts kicked in. We decided to help them out and heaved the rusted carcass up onto its side. I still remember what we saw under it. In the groove the steel had carved into the dirt was a heaving pile of small brown bodies. We disturbed a nest, or something like that. And 2 drunk guys flipping scrap metal are not exactly precise instruments. Broken lizard bodies twitched and bled in a mashed tangle. Some of them dropped their tails in panic, and the severed tails spasmed on top of their dying owners. Others tried to drag themselves away on crushed legs. The mood crashed instantly. We hadn't been planning on playing torturers. We wanted to catch lizards, not butcher them. We just didn't think before we acted. I'm not superstitious, but every now and then I wonder if that wasn't some sort of warning. If it was, then a dozen reptiles died for nothing. Sorry, scaly ones. That day I was a free, drunk guy on a trip out of town, and I was not about to let a pile of lizards ruin my weekend. I forgot about them almost instantly. Later, I remembered. Much later. We apologized to the kids for the bloody mess and headed on to the apartment, the bathroom, and Nate's computer. The rest of the night was easy and stupid. We laughed about game mods, streamers, updates, all the usual stuff. Around the corner from Nate's building, there was a tiny all-night convenience store with the ridiculous name Tina's. They had mismatched posters of cartoon bunnies from the 80s taped to the walls and sold beer that looked older than the posters. The good part? They'd clearly never heard of closing hours or alcohol restrictions. That store supplied us with booze and cigarettes all evening, and I'm sure it would have happily kept doing so all night. But that's when the real main character of this story showed up. He came right in the middle of the fun. Nate had finally dragged me away from tanks and fired up World of Warships, trying to convert me. I was torn between respecting his gameplay and wanting to yank the mouse from his hand when I heard it. A dull but clear knock on the door. Thump thump, thump thump, Thump, thump. It sounded weirdly like a slow heartbeat. At first I thought it was someone hammering something in the hallway, some genius deciding to nail a shelf up at the end of the day. And come on, who knocks like that when there's a perfectly good doorbell? Nate was so absorbed in the game he didn't hear anything. The knocking didn't stop, but it didn't get louder either. Just that same rhythm over and over, like someone sending Morse code with their knuckles. It went on long enough that it stopped being background noise and started being deeply wrong. I finally pulled Nate's attention to it. He paused, clearly annoyed, and turned his head toward the door while still watching his ship closing in on an enemy on the screen. For a few seconds, it seemed like he was going to blow me off again. Then the sound clicked for him. He froze. He killed the game volume, pushed his chair back, and stood up so fast it rattled the desk. All the color drained from his face. On the monitor, his ship started taking hits, but he didn't even glance at it. I just sat there with my mouth open. "Greg," he said finally, and I could swear his voice shook a little. "Go stand by the front door." "Why?" I asked. He didn't answer. "Just go. Stand right next to it. Don't look through the peephole. If it stops knocking, go into the bathroom and shut the door. Slam it so I hear it." "You kidding me? What the hell is going on?" "Just do it, please." There was something in his voice I'd never heard before. Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was outright panic trying to hold itself together. Nate was not a jumpy guy, not easily spooked, but whatever I heard, it made my questions die in my throat. Suddenly, I felt very, very uncomfortable. On shaky legs, I walked to the door. The instant I reached it, the knocking stopped. Silence. I almost ran straight to the bathroom like he told me to. I'd only taken a step when the knocking started again, but this time it sounded different. More muffled, further away. It took me a moment to realize they were now knocking on the door next to ours. Same rhythm, same strength, same steady heartbeat thump. It felt like some sort of survey guy who had decided he was going to hit every door no matter what. But why was nobody yelling at him to get lost? Why wasn't anyone telling him to stop? Why was the entire building dead silent? I turned around to call out to Nate and froze again. He'd already yanked all the curtains shut. Every single window in the apartment was covered with those heavy old drapes people used to hang back when color TV was exotic. He was now running around pinning and wiring shut every little gap where light might peek through. "What the hell are you doing?" I hissed. "Seriously, Nate, what is this?" He still didn't answer. The knocking kept going. After a while, it moved again, even further down the hall. Judging by how faint it sounded, somebody was hammering on the door across the stairwell now. All sorts of rational theories sprinted through my head. Some local gang sending a warning. Some strung-out guy who kept forgetting which apartment was his. Maybe something bad had happened here once. Some psycho or robber had been let in. And now everyone in the building had agreed to never open the door to anyone at night. Who wouldn't be trying to come up with rational explanations, even stupid ones. Nate finished with the curtains and walked up to me. There was a jitter in his movements that seriously worried me. Then he did something that finally killed all my maybe-it's-nothing theories. He pulled a wad of gray kneadable eraser from his pocket, the kind artists use, and pressed it carefully over the peephole in the door. That was it. I was done trying to make this fit any normal scenario. From the moment we'd heard the knocking, Nate had basically turned into someone else. The talkative guy I'd known for years was gone. Now he spoke in short, clipped phrases. It didn't sound like him at all. He stared at the door with a dead, hollow look, then turned to me. "I'm beat," he said, heads pounding. "Let's just crash. Get up early, hit some good spots tomorrow, okay?" "Sure," I muttered, still listening to the noise outside. I kept listening half the night, lying on the camp bed he'd set up for me. I didn't sleep, not even a little. I listened even after the knocking stopped, waiting for that heartbeat sound to kick in again. Thump, 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 thump. Eventually, my thoughts started tangling. The edge slowly came off my fear, and I hovered on that thin line right before sleep, where your brain starts feeding you scraps of dream logic. And that's when it hit me. Our brains are assholes sometimes. Just when we're about to drift off, they drag some obvious thought up from the depths that somehow never surfaced before. This was one of those. I jerked awake, drenched in cold sweat. Footsteps. I had not heard a single step, not once, not even a hint of someone walking down the hall. No shuffle, no creak, nothing. Just that measured knocking moving from door to door. I'd clearly heard it go all the way down the floor, hitting each apartment in turn. But between the knocks, total silence. Like whoever it wasn't actually walking, like they were gliding. I don't think the local drunks can do that. I hate feeling afraid. Normally, I know how to talk myself out of it. Not that night. As soon as my brain pointed out the missing footsteps, every cell in my body wanted to bolt. I wanted to sprint out of the building and run all the way back to the city. Hell, all the way to Alaska. Or another planet. Anywhere but this stupid building with its heartbeat knocking and taped over peephole. How I managed to stay put, I still don't understand. I have no idea if Nate slept. Judging by the fact that there was no snoring from his side of the room, I doubt it. I'm pretty sure we both lay there, awake, until the sky turned pale and birds started chirping. Only then did I finally pass out. I had a nasty dream. I forgot it right after I woke up. But not long ago, it came back to me, with razor clarity, like I'd just seen it. In the dream, I was walking through dirt. Just dirt. Endless, cold, packed earth. I walked and walked straight through it like it was fog, or like I was. It was dark, airless, tight. The soil pressed on me from every side. I was desperate to see even the smallest crack of an opening, some sign of a way out. There was nothing. Back, forward, up, down. Just miles and miles of earth. I woke up shaking. My hands and feet felt like ice, and I couldn't stop shivering, even though the morning sun was already heating the town outside. Nate was in the kitchen, cheerfully brewing coffee and blasting some heavy metal from a cheap stereo. When I stumbled in, he greeted me like nothing had happened. That fake, overbright cheerfulness killed any desire I had to bring up last night. If I pressed, I knew I'd either get a rehearsed excuse or a wall of silence. I decided to play along. After all, I didn't want to wreck what was left of the weekend either. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. That afternoon, I told Nate I wanted to go for a walk. That was partly true. I did wander around town. I just wasn't sightseeing. I paced like a caged animal trying to think. No point boring you with the random thoughts that chased each other around my skull while I stomped through Greywater's back streets. The important thing happened when I stopped for a smoke near a row of old garages, the same kind of rusted metal boxes that had hidden me from my parents back when I was in middle school. Those boxes are perfect for hiding in. Maybe that's why I nearly dropped my cigarette when an old man came out from between them. He didn't look threatening, just another retiree in worn sweatpants. He asked me for a light, then, clearly hungry for conversation, made a couple of small talk attempts. I really wasn't in the mood, but it felt rude to blow off this random grandpa, so I humored him. He introduced himself as Old Mike and asked if I'd just moved in. No, just visiting for a couple of days, I said. I gave him Nate's full name. I'm staying with a friend. He painted one of the churches in town. Maybe you know him? Oh, sure. The art teacher from apartment 19, Old Mike said. Good kid. So you're staying there? He lowered his voice a bit. Then I guess you heard the knocker last night. Tough luck. The who? I asked, even though I already had a pretty good guess. The knocker, he repeated, flicking ash onto his pants. You really didn't hear him? Someone was pounding on the doors late at night, I said, if that's what you mean. I felt almost relieved. If this thing had a nickname, that meant it was just some local crazy, right? Something people exaggerated and turned into a ghost story. Maybe I just psyched myself out. Nate didn't tell you? Old Mike frowned. Idiot. I didn't freak out, I lied. You should have, he said. What if you'd looked through the peephole? You tell him from me, next time he should use his brain. I don't understand, I said, and I didn't. Old Mike shook his head, tossed the butt, and ground it out under his shoe. Let me explain, he said. Listen, and I did. As it turned out, nobody really knew what the knocker was. Nobody had seen it, but everyone had heard it. It doesn't come often, Old Mike told me. Couple times a year, maybe. Sometimes there's just days between visits. Sometimes weeks, months, half a year. No pattern. Not the moon, not the seasons, nothing. But it does follow two rules. First, the knocker only shows up at night, sometime between 9 p.m. and 1 in the morning. Second, it never uses doorbells. It only rattles door handles and pounds on the wood. That's how it got the nickname. Nobody knew if it ever walked outside in the yard, but just in case, people started closing their blinds whenever it came, and eventually they started doing that every night out of habit. Nobody knew how many people had actually encountered it or been affected by it. Most of them, if they did, probably never talked about it. But there were 3 cases Old Mike had seen himself. First one was back in the mid-'80s, he said. One of the old-timers. He lived right above me. Guy was ancient, like 90-something. Healthy, walked on his own, did his own shopping, but his mind, well, not the sharpest anymore. One night, Old Mike heard the knocker making its usual rounds, and this time, the old man upstairs opened his door. No screaming, no crash, no nothing, Old Mike said. Just silence. And from that day, he never came out again. Everyone knew what that meant. They all knew the knocker had been by that night. At first, nobody wanted to go near the apartment. Eventually, guilt beat out fear and someone tried to check on him. The old man didn't answer. They called the cops. The cops couldn't get the door open. They called a crew with tools. According to Old Mike, they broke 3 angle grinders on that ancient wooden door. 3. Maybe he exaggerated that part, I thought. But breaking even 1 grinder on a cheap hollow door is bizarre. Either way, they failed. The door didn't budge. Then the building manager showed up, Old Mike said. Smart guy for a manager. He knew all about the knocker. Talked to the cops, told them the place was in bad shape and had to be sealed. Paperwork, stamps, that sort of thing. I don't know what deal he made with who, but nobody's gone in there since. It's still sealed. You can see the stickers. Nobody knows what's in there now. Nobody knows what happened to the old man. Nobody really wants to know. I'm one of those people, I thought. The second case was almost 20 years later. One of the tenants died, Old Mike said. Natural causes, I hope. His place went to some relatives, young couple with a 2-year-old girl. They tried to warn them about the knocker, of course, but the new owner didn't take it seriously. He laughed it off. He was young, strong, full of common sense, not the type to be scared by ghost stories. When the knocker came to his door, he opened it and saw nothing. He even complained to a neighbor the next morning about some idiot banging and running off. For a while, everything seemed fine, Old Mike said. We started hoping maybe it missed them. Then people stopped hearing the wife and the daughter through the walls. The husband's voice still came through sometimes, apparently addressing them, but nobody heard them answer. When people asked, he answered calmly that they were home, that they were fine. Everybody shrugged. People have weird family dynamics sometimes. Then the smell started. The sour, sweet, unmistakable stench of something dead in the middle of summer. A group of neighbors finally cornered the guy in the hall and demanded to know what was going on. He acted confused, old Mike said. Didn't seem to understand what we were talking about. They pushed past him and went into the apartment. In the kitchen, his wife was slumped over the table, old Mike said quietly. Dead. Flies all over her. His little girl was lying on a rug in her room, surrounded by coloring books and crayons. Also dead. And the worst part? They hadn't realized they were dead. He was still talking to them, old Mike said. He'd been living with their bodies, cooking, watching TV, going to work, and talking to them as if they were alive. One of the neighbors later told old Mike that when they burst in, the man was in the middle of complaining to his dead wife about that jerk last night and telling his scared daughter that everything would be okay. The cops pinned the deaths on him, sort of, but the autopsy found nothing. No strangling, no obvious trauma, no poison, nothing. They had to stretch their imaginations just to find some way to put a charge on him. And one of my friends worked in the coroner's office back then, old Mike told me. He told me over drinks they never found a real cause. Nothing. They just decided legally that he'd done it. As far as the system was concerned, case closed. As for him, old Mike shrugged. I think they put him in a psych ward, or a prison with a medical wing. I never found out, but he was gone. The third story took a while to drag out of old Mike. He tried to change the subject, coughed, started talking about the weather, but eventually he gave in. Some years later, somebody finally managed to sell a place here, he said. Not because of the knocker, just because this building's far from town and kind of a dump. But someone sold it to a single guy and got out. Again, people tried to warn the new tenant. This time they tried to be reasonable, to put it in terms that wouldn't make him laugh in their faces. He called me once, old Mike said. I'm the guy everyone calls when something electrical breaks. He came over, expecting to reset a circuit breaker. The guy looked awful, pale, shaking. His electrical was fine, old Mike said, but he took me into his living room, and there was a door. A door? I repeated. Yeah, a door that wasn't supposed to be there, sticking right out of the wall that faced outside. Not a closet, not some hidden storage space. Just an ordinary, slightly scuffed door in a place where there couldn't be a room behind it at all. Because behind that wall was the open air and a 3-story drop. He asked me if I saw it, old Mike said. I said yes. Of course I saw it. Hard to miss. He said it appeared after he'd opened his door to the knocker one night and found nobody there. They both stood listening, and then the man said, "Do you hear that?" From behind the door came the faint, labored sound of someone breathing, or something. It sounded like something big, old Mike said, like something heavy trying to drag air into ruined lungs. Old Mike left. He circled the building in daylight, just in case there was some weird annex outside. Nothing, just the normal wall. From that day on, the tenant got more and more pale and jittery. Every time old Mike saw him, he looked worse. He told me once, "It's breathing louder now, like it's closer," old Mike said. I didn't know what to tell him. After a few more days, the man disappeared. This time, the door to his actual apartment opened like normal. The cops went in. Old Mike didn't dare even peek out of his own place while they were investigating. Not because of them, because of what they might find. What they found at first was nothing. No guy, no extra door, no nothing, old Mike said. just an empty apartment. Later, the story grew details. People started saying there weren't even any things in there. No clothes, no dishes, no towels. It was like nobody had ever lived there. The cops thought someone had pulled off a really elaborate cleanup. They started digging into the paperwork, and that's where it got weird. Every document they checked on the tenant came up empty. His social security number didn't exist. His ID didn't match any database. It was like he'd never existed. The seller got in trouble, old Mike said. They accused him of fraud, forgery, whatever they could. Eventually, an older woman bought the apartment, moved in with her adult daughter, and they're still there. Still alive, because apparently they listened. I didn't know what to say. If old Mike had dumped all that on me the night before, I would have laughed in his face. But now I had heard that precise heartbeat knock myself. He could have exaggerated, sure. He's an old man. Maybe he added some horror spice here and there. But even 1/10 of what he'd said was already a full-blown nightmare. Yeah, great story, I muttered, fishing another cigarette out of the pack. I wouldn't have believed it either if I hadn't seen what I've seen, old Mike said, misreading my silence. I messed up once too. He told me one night he'd gotten drunk and forgotten to close his curtains. The knocker came that night. I spent the whole night under the covers like a kid, he said. Don't know what I was more afraid of, seeing it or having it see me. And did anything happen? I asked. Yes and no, he said. I didn't disappear. I'm still here. Didn't go insane, didn't bury anybody. But something did happen. Not the worst thing the knocker's done, but I'd gouge out my own eye before I'd go through it again. He lit another cigarette and told me the last part. It was 99 or 2000, he said, back when they first started putting in keypad locks on the front doors, not these new shiny ones. Big metal boxes with 10 clunky buttons and no intercom. If you didn't know the code, tough luck. He kept forgetting the code. Sometimes he'd catch a neighbor going in. Sometimes he'd bang on a first-floor window until someone noticed. Annoying, but manageable. One morning, I was halfway to work when I realized I'd forgotten my wire cutters, he said. Had to go back. I get to the door, punch in the code, and nothing. And nobody's going in or out. I try banging on windows. Nobody home. Finally, I just start pressing random numbers. Why not? Maybe I'd get lucky. He did. The door clicked open. The code wasn't even close to our actual code, he said. I still remember it. 1289. Completely wrong. But the door opened. He rushed upstairs, not thinking about anything except being late. Everything felt normal. Same dull walls, same stairwell smell. Then he got to his apartment and noticed the lock. I turned the key 4 times, he said. Our lock only ever needed 2 turns. There weren't even 4 positions on that thing. But somehow, that morning I had to turn it 4 times. He says he didn't think about it until later. He walked in, saw his wire cutters on the windowsill where he'd left them, went to grab them, and glanced out the window. That's when everything went to hell, he said. Normally, his window looked out onto the courtyard, playground, trees, then the edge of the woods in the distance. Not that morning. That morning there was nothing, he said. No trees, no playground, no other buildings. Just ground, all the way to the horizon, bare dirt, and these bushes. Short, knee-high bushes with thin, twisted branches and leaves, wrong-colored leaves. I still can't name that color, he said. Ugly. Somewhere between red and brown, like dried blood or raw liver. Just those bushes, and the sky. And the sky was wrong too, he said. Yellow at the top, gray lower down, almost black near the ground. He backed away from the window, crossing himself even though he'd barely set foot in church since he was a kid. He walked backward until he hit the front door, scared that if he looked away, something would crawl out of the view. "I don't really remember how I made it to the hall," he said. My heart felt like it stopped. Then, right as he tripped over the threshold into the building's stairwell, the pounding started. Only this time, it was from inside. "Somebody started hammering on the nearest apartment doors," he said. "From the inside, like they were trying to break out. Then the next door, then the next. Every door." The whole building shook. The glass rattled. The concrete vibrated under his feet. "Imagine every door in the place being hit from the inside at once," he said. That's what it felt like. Then, behind him, something screamed. "Not a person, not an animal," he said. "Imagine a train whistle trying to scream in a human voice." That sound snapped him out of his paralysis. He took off. He ran down the stairs as the building shook around him, sure the walls were going to crumble. He was equally sure something unseen was racing after him. He didn't see it. He didn't hear footsteps. He just knew something was right behind him. He slammed into the front door, hit the button, and burst out into the real world. "Next thing I remember, I was in bed," he said. "My wife was sitting next to me, crying. Turned out I'd had a heart attack." The first thing he did when he came to was limp to the window. Everything outside was normal again. Trees, playground, cars. "For a year I wouldn't go up the stairs alone," he said. "If my wife went on work trips, I'd ask the neighbors to walk with me and look out the window with me. You think it's funny? I still don't like windows." He went quiet for a moment. "Every time I look out, I think I'll see those bushes again," he said. "And those leaves." Then he looked down at his sweatpants and frowned. "Well, speak of the devil," he said. He brushed something off his leg, then held it out to me. It was a leaf. I stared at it for a few seconds. It was the size and shape of a birch leaf, but I would stake anything you like that it had never grown on any tree in this world. It had that same sick, flesh-like color old Mike had tried to describe. A raw meat pink shot through with dark, almost black veins. It looked like a little slice of organ tissue, not plant. And it was pulsing. I watched the veins swell and relax in a steady rhythm. There was no wind. Nothing was moving it. It was just beating, like a tiny heart. I could almost hear the sound that rhythm matched. Thump, 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 thump. That was enough for me. I muttered a goodbye, recoiled from old Mike, and walked away as fast as I could. He looked a bit apologetic, but I couldn't bring myself to care if I'd hurt his feelings. I walked straight back toward Nate's building, moving as fast as I could without breaking into a run. The invisible nighttime knocker scared me less now than that little piece of whatever world old Mike had seen through his window. On the way, I repeated to myself, "Screw the knocker. Screw old Mike and his leaves. Screw all of this. You heard a bunch of creepy stories, Greg. That's it. Tomorrow you'll be back in the city. All this will stay here in Greywater. This is not your problem. Go back, have a drink, talk Nate into one more fishing trip, finish the weekend like a normal human being. Just pretend none of this happened. Solid plan, amigo." I lasted until evening. As night fell, my nerves snapped. To save face, I stuck my nose in my phone for a bit, then told Nate my boss had texted about some urgent, can't-miss event at the office. I tossed in some complaining about idiots who couldn't plan anything ahead, about how I'd gladly stay, but duty calls, all that crap. Nate listened without interrupting. He nodded in all the right places, even made a couple of sympathetic noises. But the look on his face told me he understood perfectly well why I was really leaving. I threw my stuff into my backpack and left fast. By the time I got to the edge of the woods, maybe 20 yards from the building, I did the one thing I absolutely should not have done. I looked back. I just wanted to prove to myself that it was all in my head, that from the outside, this was just another ugly old walk-up, nothing more. The cheap stucco walls, the crooked balconies. nothing else. That illusion lasted 2 seconds. At first I thought I was seeing a shadow, a huge, uneven patch of darkness on the side of the building, like some tree was throwing its outline across the wall. Later I remembered there were no trees close enough to cast a shadow like that. The area around the building was bare. No trunks, no tall bushes, nothing but cracked asphalt and scrubby grass. The shadow moved. It slid down the wall a little, then lowered something like a limb onto the windowsill of the top floor. I didn't care if it was an arm, a leg, a tentacle. I didn't want to know. Instead of running, I froze. I didn't even breathe. I just watched. There's a kind of fear that makes you want to look away and stare harder at the same time. I'm the kind of idiot who fails the willpower check and keeps staring, which is how I saw the whole descent. I still can't fully describe how it moved. It didn't make sense. The closest I can get is this. Imagine a drop of thick, dark syrup stretching itself down from a windowsill, while something like 2 blunt, jointless limbs feel for the next ledge. It used the outer windowsills like stairs. Each time the main mass slid down in a slow, controlled motion, while the lower part elongated and set itself carefully on the next sill down. No head, no face, not really a body, just a large, droplet-shaped mass with 2 supports. One step, then another. No sound. I could still hear leaves rustling nearby, a dog barking somewhere, even the distant laughter of kids playing in the street. But the thing on the wall made no noise at all. It moved methodically, like a construction worker going down a tall ladder. Step, step, step. It reached the last windowsill and touched the ground, and kept going. One of its legs sank into the dirt as if it were water. No hole, no displaced soil, nothing. It simply passed through. Then it stopped, like it had found something solid beneath the surface. Then it continued its descent. Nothing on the ground moved, not a sprinkle of dust. It just kept stepping downward into the earth, same smooth rhythm as before, like the apartment block kept going under the ground, floor after floor after floor. It moved, in my mind, past imaginary windows and invisible rooms, down and down and down. And that was what terrified me the most. Not the thing itself, not the way it slipped into solid ground, not the risk it might turn and notice me. What really broke something inside my head was the idea of that building continuing under the surface. More apartments, more hallways, more windows, all buried in soil, lending their invisible sills to whatever that thing was using as stairs. After a few more steps, it was simply gone. The battered 3-story building stood there again, perfectly ordinary to any passerby. I didn't know how long I stood in place after that before my legs decided to start walking. Not running, not creeping, just walking in a daze toward the station. My thoughts didn't return to the train schedule, or my life, or even Nate. They kept circling the same thing, the floors beneath the building. How many were there? How far down did they go? Was there a bottom? What was behind the glass of those impossible windows? Eventually, I found myself at the station. I have no idea how I didn't get lost. Some autopilot got me there. For the first time in my life, I was genuinely happy to see drunk college kids yelling on the platform and the flickering of filthy streetlights. I was home, or at least in the world I understood. It would be nice if I could end the story there. If I could say, I went back to the city, slowly got over it, and now I'm not sure what really happened. Anyway, take care. That would be great, but that's not how this goes. If it had ended there, I wouldn't be typing this. The big finale happened just a couple of months ago, long after Greywater had stopped haunting my dreams every night, and life had more or less gone back to normal. I say normal in the sense that nothing major had changed. I still pined over girls, dragged myself to work, spent evenings playing tanks and chatting with Nate. We never mentioned the knocker. We talked about fishing, game patches, people on the forums. But the knocking? The taped-over peephole? Not a word. It was like we both agreed not to think about it. Then, at the end of winter, Nate disappeared. At first, I didn't worry. People take breaks from the internet, get busy, vanish for a few days. But after a while, it became clear this wasn't that. His social media profiles were gone. Not just deactivated, gone. Our chat history vanished with them. And yes, I know most platforms keep your chat even if the other person deletes their account. I scrolled my inbox top to bottom. Nothing. No history. No name. I checked our World of Tanks clan and forums. He'd been removed from the friends list. His username gave no search results. Threads he'd started, posts he'd made, all gone. He'd been active. He'd written long guides, battle reports, recruitment posts. Deleted all that would take effort. Now it was like no one by that name had ever existed online. I started asking our mutual gaming friends, "Hey, you seen Nate lately? Remember him?" The answers were always the same. Who? Not just no. They didn't remember him at all. I was the only one. When you're the only person who remembers someone who's been erased from the internet and everybody's memory, that's when you start thinking seriously about mental breakdowns. I was honestly more worried about myself than about Nate at that point, which is why I made one last stupid decision. I went back to Greywater. I figured if anyone would know what had happened to him, it would be his neighbors. Best case, I find Nate hungover, alive, with some insane story about his accounts being hacked. At minimum, I talked to old Mike again. I didn't know Nate's address exactly. The first time he'd met me at the station and led the way, but I have a good visual memory. I remembered every path, every turn, every little kiosk and bench along the way. It wasn't hard to find the spot, except the building was gone. I prepared myself for a lot of things. His door sealed with tape, an empty apartment, new tenants who didn't know him. I wasn't prepared for a field of scrubby brush where the building used to stand. No mistake. Same old playground with rusty swings, same bent lamppost that had lit my view of the thing crawling down the wall. Same line of garages where I'd smoked with old Mike. And there, of course, was Tina's. And there couldn't possibly be two stores like that in the same universe, let alone the same town. Hands shaking, I went inside, recognized the faded bunny posters, and asked the cashier where the nearest apartment building was. She looked at me like I might be dangerous and told me how to get to another walk-up a few blocks away. I even went and checked, just in case my memory was way off. But no, that building looked completely different, and it was a good 15-minute walk from the store. Back when Nate and I had run out for beer, it had taken us maybe 3 minutes. I still went in, climbed to the floor where Nate's place would have been, knocked on the apartment with the same number. A tired woman with 2 kids opened the door just far enough to give me a suspicious stare. "How long have you lived here?" I blurted out. She shut the door in my face. There was still some daylight left, so I spent the next hours combing Greywater. I walked every street, every alley, trying to find some angle, some view that would match what I had in my head. Nothing. No building, no Nate, no old Mike. Sometimes I dialed Nate's number on my phone like an idiot. Number dialed is not in service. I tried calling the most selfless, generous friend I had back in the city, the kind of person you always owe money to, but still call when you need more. Number dialed is not in service. By the time I dragged myself home that night, I was beyond exhausted. Mentally, physically, emotionally. I collapsed into bed, still in my clothes. Sometime after midnight, I woke up to knocking on my front door. My door. Thump, 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 thump. It was almost funny. I recognized the rhythm half asleep. I'd heard it in dreams a couple of times since Greywater. There was no doubt in my mind who was on the other side. The knocker. No Nate. No old Mike. No one to tell me, don't look. Just me. There's no pretending nothing happened anymore. I tried at first. I told myself it was stress, hallucinations, sleep paralysis, whatever. I went to doctors, took the pills, got myself prescribed enough sedatives to sleep through a meteor strike. It helped for a while. For maybe a week, I didn't wake up to the knocking. I actually slept. Then it changed. The knocking kept coming. Only now, something else started happening. The world itself began to thin out.
Every morning I look out my living room window at the courtyard I grew up with. I know it by heart. The big maple tree, the swing set, the slide, the sandbox, the school building down the street, the ugly electrical box, the other apartment blocks, one on the right, two across, one tall building to the left, 4 buildings. Then there were 3. The first time it was just a missing streetlight. I convinced myself they'd removed it. Then a cherry tree disappeared. I rationalized it. They cut it down, maybe it was diseased. But when an entire building went away, there was no way to file that under maintenance. One morning, where there should have been a 12-story tower, there was just air. And on the ground, freshly turned earth, like someone had dug a grave the size of a city block and then smoothed it over. I tried to ignore it, all day, every day. Tried to focus on work. Then my office disappeared. It started with the door. I got to the floor, turned the corner, and where there should have been a door with a cheap number plate, there was just wall, painted like the rest of the corridor. I stood there in my business casual clothes and backpack, staring at the blank spot where my job had been. I checked the floor number, the building address, the company name on my phone. Everything was correct. There just wasn't a door anymore. I asked the building's cleaning lady where Office 49 had gone. She frowned and said she didn't know. She'd never heard of it. My office, where I'd worked for 3 years, gone, like it had never been there. I went outside, circled the building, checked the signs, the street name, the number. Everything matched, except reality. I went home. On the subway, the shock wore off enough for my brain to latch onto something more mundane. Money. No job meant no paycheck. The last salary had mostly gone on rent and food. The next one had been due in a couple of days. Now it wasn't coming. I needed to find work. Fast. Anything. Freelance, part-time, didn't matter, but even that would take time I didn't have. When I climbed out of the station, I called my most generous friend again. The one I kept borrowing money from. The one I'd never quite repaid. Number dialed is not in service. I swore, loudly. People stared. I didn't care. I tried again. Same answer. I ran home, tripped over my own feet getting to my computer, opened my friends list. Her profile was gone. Page not found. I spammed messages to mutual friends, asking where she'd gone. Most of them responded quickly. Sorry, who? And that was it. What was I supposed to do? Go back to the doctors and tell them my office and my friends and random buildings were disappearing? Ask for a stronger medication? They'd have put me on observation at best. Go to friends and family? Let them disappear too? Kill myself and skip to the end? Didn't sound appealing. So I did none of that. I locked my front door. I taped over my peephole. I pulled all my curtains shut. Then, for some stupid reason, I lit a couple of candles. Maybe my subconscious decided to save on electricity in case that vanished too. Then I sat down at my computer and started writing. I'm writing slowly. I have nowhere to be and nothing to rush for. I'm trying to remember every detail, to capture every little thing.
I even outlined the story before I started, which is hilarious because I used to hate writing essays in school. But this is all I have. I've lived a pretty forgettable life. If I'm honest, the whole knocker ordeal is probably the most interesting thing that's ever happened to me. That's not a compliment to my life, but it's the truth. So if I'm going to leave something behind, let it be this. Better than rambling on about how my ex cheated on me, or how we used to smoke weed in someone's basement. I don't even know if these words will ever reach the internet. I don't know if there is still an internet out there where people exist and scroll and read. Maybe this file will sit on a dead hard drive until the plastic rots. Maybe some horror fan will find it and post this creepy story I found. I've been typing for a little over a week now. In that time, my friends list has shrunk from 200 to maybe 50 people. I'd love to believe I'm just becoming less popular. I really would. But the vanishing profiles say otherwise. The numbers in my phone that haven't turned into not in service are getting fewer and fewer. Some numbers have simply vanished from the contacts list. I don't remember them by heart. A couple of days ago, I couldn't take the silence anymore. Real silence. No neighbors, no TVs through the walls, no footsteps, nothing. Only the nightly knocking on my own door, right on schedule. Thump, 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 thump. I tried to ignore that too, but there's only so much pretending you can do. One afternoon, I snapped, stumbled out of my apartment, unshaven, smelling like sweat and stale clothes, and decided to knock on my neighbors' doors. I even prepared a couple of stupid excuses. Ask for a cigarette, borrow some sugar, ask if they heard some idiot knocking at night. I didn't use any of them. Where my neighbor's doors should have been, there were only bare concrete walls. Just smooth gray where there should have been frames, locks, peepholes. I stared for a long time. Then I went back inside and locked my door. I haven't tried to go out since. 2 days ago, I soaked the last moldy crust of bread in water and ate it. You could count my ribs like xylophone bars now. I've run out of tea, out of cigarettes, out of canned food. Even the tap water is down to a thin, irregular trickle. Doesn't matter. The lights still work. The router is still blinking. As long as I can see this screen and feel the keys under my fingers, there's hope I can finish this before I'm gone. Yes, I finally understood. The world isn't disappearing. I am. Just like everyone else who met the knocker face to face. Maybe somewhere, in some other layer of reality, Nate is pestering his World of Tanks friends about my mysterious disappearance. Maybe old Mike is shaking his head sadly. Maybe some cops are making calls to morgues, asking about a John Doe from my building. Maybe. Or maybe it's the world that's coming apart. Maybe the universe broke. Maybe space-time continuum did that chain reaction thing, and now everything is unraveling. In that case, nobody will ever read this. Doesn't matter. Whether I'm dying or the world is, either way, it's almost over. Right now, as I type these words, my balcony looks out on nothing. No trees, no parking lot, no street, no other buildings. Just churned up earth, like a shallow grave for the whole neighborhood. I sleep a lot now. Sleep has always been my favorite way of dealing with stress. Also, there's nothing else left to do. When I sleep, I dream of earth. Damp, loose soil around me in all directions. I walk through it like through fog. And to my right, there are windows. Endless rows of blurry windows. I know I shouldn't be able to see them through all that dirt, but I do. Somehow, my vision slides sideways and shows them to me. Behind each pane, something moves. A dense, packed mass. It looks like a nest of lizards crushed together, like a knot of worms in a corpse, like TV static that turned organic. I don't want to see it clearly. I don't want it to come into focus. But deep down, I know, if I really looked, if the glass cleared, I'd see more of that same dark stuff I saw sliding down the building in gray water. I know that whatever's behind those windows is made from me, from us, from the parts of us that get scraped off when we vanish. It sloughs off from my shadow, from the shine in my eyes, from the sound of my footsteps. It piles up out there behind those windows, and it keeps moving. I wish I could say I'm about to snap, that I'm at my breaking point, but there's nowhere to snap to.
No way out, no exit, maybe no beginning either. I'm not even sure anymore if the world was ever a normal place, or if I made it up to distract myself from the truth, that it's always been just earth, windows, and something walking through it forever. It doesn't even scare me anymore to wonder what happens when the dreams stop, because sooner or later, there won't be anyone left to dream them.